Hey everyone, so I already tried filming this video yesterday and I ended up kind of giving myself a bit of a sore throat. I'm unfortunately still sick. That hasn't changed since my last video. So if this video is maybe a little bit extra rough, or there's a lot more sort of jump cuts where I've in post had to like edit out awkward pauses or just, like coughing breaks, honestly, that I've had to take, that's why it kind of sucks. Other things, the wall behind me has changed. I've rotated the camera somewhat, and the camera is still on that ledge I talked about in my first video, but now the ledge is actually mostly behind the camera, and I have my phone propped up a little bit more securely, so the exact angle and things might still change between shots, but otherwise there's, yeah, hopefully a little bit less shifting that's going to go on. Also, the power of the sun has been tamed and put a bit more in that corner, so that will hopefully make for a bit better of a viewing experience as well. Oh yeah, and the gloves are staying, this time not for sweat reasons, but because I figured they'd be kind of a good gimmick. Also because of that whole ethics thing that I brought up really briefly in my first video. I think they would be a good excuse to, claim that I'm spreading ethical practices for handling antiques, right? Because pretty much all of my videos are going to be featuring an antique at some point, so it just kind of makes sense that I have these on. Yeah, I guess without further ado, so this is basically an additional response video after I uploaded my first video. Pretty soon after, Reloph made his own response to that, his own thoughts basically about what I had said. That video is actually currently unlisted on his channel, but he did give me permission to link it in the description. So if you want to see the full context for this response to his response, feel free to do that. Otherwise, I've figured out 3 main points that I want to respond to and indeed give my thoughts on. And I've already figured, because like I said, I tried filming this once before, almost certainly the length of my thoughts for those first 2 points will be long enough to make up this entire video pretty much. So the third point is going to be in its own video. That will also be an excuse, or it will allow me to go much more in depth about that without having to worry about like the length of the video or anything. And yeah, it's also like a bit more of a general subject as well. It's not super specific to this discussion about Katar grips or what have you. It'll still be relevant sort of to this specific topic a little bit, but it'll be a much more broader video. And unfortunately, both this video and probably the following one will be still rather long. Like I said, when I tried filming this before, unless I magically managed to be a lot more concise this time around, it seems like the video will still be a bit long. So to that end, I'll try and put the timestamps in again. And I'll have probably it separated, in editing, still with like individual sections, but I'll timestamp, all of my points and things like that. Okay, so without further ado, the first point, the first section or topic that I want to get into is the idea of a sort of manual combination weapon. Manual in the sense that it's done, with your hands. This is something that Reloph brought up. The idea isn't that you do this grip by itself in isolation, but actually the main thing is that you do it with a shield. And now, unfortunately, this is the only shield I have on hand, really, that's Dhal-like. This is the Purple Heart Armory 14-inch, steel kind of sparring shield. Immediately, it, though, is a bit of a confounding variable because of the part where this grip is not the best. They actually just straight up send you this leather strap to do with whatever you will. So yeah, I had to go to ISA for help to like get this binding so I could actually just hold the thing in place. But so because of that, what I'm trying to get at is that it's a bit thicker of a grip than I think a traditional Dhal would have. So again, it's a confounding variable in that it's already taking up more space in my hand than it probably should. So that's worth noting. But when I combine this, as Reloph says is apparently the main thing, it's not supposed to be, again, wielded separately, but in combination with a shield. That's why the grip is like this, because you're already holding onto a shield, and so you're just using the extra, I guess, length of your fingers to hold onto the guitar. After trying this, though, off camera for a bit, I'm still not that convinced, though. it still just feels weaker. I still would much prefer just holding on to it normally. And actually what it really served is just something for me to focus on in regards to the effectiveness of those kind of manual combination weapons, right, that I brought up. Because this, I'm not sure I feel like, to begin with, the idea of combining, you know, a katar with a shield and possibly also a dagger being held here, you know, I'm not too convinced, just in that topic in general, that that's really that much of a useful thing. I think my main issue being that not only is this not, like, super stable, you know, there's nothing wrong necessarily with it being rattly like this, but it doesn't inspire confidence. It doesn't make me feel like, oh yeah, I've got this super secure setup or anything like that. And I don't know, to me, it just makes a lot more sense to just have the rim of your shield if you're going to strike someone with it, rather than aiming with a specific thing. Thankfully, because of the way that the katar is designed, it does fit solidly in the hand. Like I said, though, I think this grip is better than this. Like, even with this thicker than average shield grip that I have, I can still just wrap my fingers around, and I think that's a lot more useful. But like I said, you know, the katar does stay in the hand pretty well, so that's not really the issue. It's just, I'm not convinced, like, look at, this is 14 inches, right? This blade really isn't that substantial, all things considered, and it's honestly much more important when you have a shield in the first place to focus on its defensive capabilities. Yes, you can punch with it, like I said, you can strike with the rim and everything, but you're already going to be having a sword or an axe or something else in your other hand. So the idea that, oh, we have to maximize the offensive capabilities of this, it's like, well, it's, you know, it's a big chunk of whatever sturdy material you have, and whether it's, you know, hardened leather or steel, I think it's still, it just makes more sense to use it as it is. Just bash someone with it, or again, strike with the rim. I don't see the purpose in just adding all these extra bells and whistles when it's like an Occam's razor kind of thing. The simplest solution or technique, the simplest technique just seems to be the best for me. And that's most of what I want to talk about in this section of the video, is that, again, like, yes, you can do it. Yes, you can do the Sirohi grip with a Sirohi style katar, but I think all of my points from the first video still stand. Like, this doesn't override the points I made in my previous video. Like, this grip feels a lot stronger to me, even though this is, you know, supposed to be, this is another thing that Reloph said, this grip is supposed to be done with the smaller katar. With the normal one, you grip it normally, but with the smaller one, that's when this comes into play. And again, like, no, I don't think so. My opinions aren't changed by that. So yeah, that's really the main relevance to the whole discussion about this specific style of katar and the grip to hold it. For the rest of this segment, I just want to talk about that idea of a manual combination weapon. And I should say that a lot of the other weapons that I feature in this video, along with, you know, the, like, idea of manual combination weapons in general, I'll probably be making separate videos about them sometime in the future. So like I was saying with that third point where it's going to be going more in detail, yeah, at some point in the future I will make a video that's just dedicated solely to those manual combination weapons, the idea of holding multiple things in your hand, and that will go more in depth into that. Yeah. Okay, so with the main topic addressed, now to go into a bit of a ramble just about my thoughts about the general idea of it, right? Again, I'll go more in depth on this in a separate video, but for now I feel like it's important, since I am making these videos, these response videos publicly, and that's kind of the idea, is that I think the stuff, maybe not specific to this katar, but I think the things like the points that are adjacent to it are those that are worth sharing with, like, the broader community of sword people, sword enthusiasts. And so yeah, that's why I'm doing these publicly in the first place, is because I think it's relevant information. I think it's stuff that other people should be made aware of. So that's why I'm doing these, like, public response videos in the first place, right? Is because I think the subjects maybe not specific to this style of katar, right? Because it's a very almost esoteric conversation, right? You're talking about this one specific grip to a specific style of katar, more or less. But I think the immediately adjacent points and subjects are worth sort of bringing attention to, right? So that's the idea with that. So getting into it now with a bigger guitar, and this one I didn't show before, or I haven't shown before on the channel. This is a Mysorean guitar from Mysore, of southern Karnataka, modern day Karnataka anyways. And this is the longest just regular sized guitar that I have, so it's what I'm going to be mostly using here. Really, to me, this sort of brings, or it highlights the fact that this is entirely dependent, the efficacy, the efficiency of having a katar and shield combination here is highly dependent upon blade length, right? It's highly dependent on the style of guitar, because this, one of the reasons why I have this is because it's a really good example, just archetypically, of what your general South Indian guitar would look like. Obviously, the, exact aesthetics would change from region to region. The, style of like the grip bars and everything would change. But in terms of, blade length and the blade itself, this is found throughout southern India, and it is, in my opinion, kind of actually really the only style of guitar that would work with this combination. North Indian guitars, whilst they can be similarly long-bladed, they tend to look a lot more like this, right? They tend to be a lot more triangular, a lot stouter, and whilst you do find versions that are made for real sincere battlefield usage that do have longer blades, right? Because, having that kind of reach is important in a battlefield context, even if it's only a few extra inches. It's, still a lot more common, especially on a civilian style of guitar, or a more civilian style, that you would find something about this length. So this is indeed a northern style of guitar, right? I think I've kind of established that through my adjacent rant about it. But when we combine that, you'll see now I have just like a little nub. So this, I would argue, just inherently, because of the blade length, it's kind of a bad idea. And so, for the rest of the video, we have to kind of talk specifically about this South Indian style, which is worth noting, India as a whole is not a monolith. It's a very diverse region, and so while, yes, it's possible for, say, a Sikh up in the Punjab region to be carrying one of these and to do this kind of combination, it's not entirely realistic because, trade networks exist across the world, but the idea that, like, South Indian guitars would be exported en masse up to the northern states for, Mughal usage or anything like that, that's just not how that works. We just don't have any evidence of that. And so I feel like that's an important point to bring up, is that not only do you kind of have to have a smaller shield in order for this to really work, to have an actual amount of blade to work with, practically speaking, but also, like, because of that requirement, you have to look specifically at southern guitars. You have to look at long-bladed guitars. You can't look at a more normal, sort of stout type of blade. You have to look more or less just at the south instead of the north, which is worth bringing up because that kind of means that inherently this style of combination is kind of region locked, or it should be. And that's sort of an issue to me because people in general like to bring up this thing of, oh, you can just sort of mix and match whatever you want to when it comes to Indian weapons. But no, you can't. There are practical limits to it. Like I said, there's no evidence of these big north-south trade networks where something made down in the southern tip of India could be brought up to Mughal courts or anything. That's just not what we know from, like, the miniatures. We know that's not the fashion. They preferred their own native styles, basically, that were developed in the north, right? There's a whole lot of, like, nationalism, basically, back in the day, or, empire-dependent kind of loyalty like that. So you just wouldn't see anything like that. And it's, again, I think it's just important to bring up because the idea that this would be like a thing done ubiquitously and subsequently sort of commonly throughout the subcontinent, it's just not true. That sort of bringing the, or adjusting the viewpoint to a historical one, right? It's not that commonplace, or it doesn't seem like it would be, inherent to the fact that only one style of guitar really works with this, right? And so that being said, okay, if we do accept that you kind of have to have a big guitar for this, what is the use of this, right? Like I said earlier in the segment, like with the Sirohi guitar, it's not going anywhere in the hand. This actually is pretty comfortable, even with, half of my palm being taken up by the shield. This isn't really going anywhere. It still does rattle around a little bit. Like I said, it's a full-length guitar, so it fits better in the hand. It's not as cramped or anything. So I can hold it a bit more securely in place. and so the rattle isn't as great. It is still there though, so like I said, it inherently is a bit of a red flag to me, even if it doesn't functionally change much. But you know, yeah, you can stab with it, you can cut with it, and I think the main thing, sort of strategically speaking, would be the idea that you can like block a blade or like redirect it or something like that. Which, I mean, yeah, sure, but again, sort of practically speaking, and also taking into account history, like if we're talking about doing this on a battlefield context, you would probably be using a shield bigger than this, and so, you know, unless you're carrying it just so you can like quickly draw the katar, like quickly take it from the other hand and use it in close quarters, I don't see the battlefield context for this being all that practical. And when it comes to a duel, I think maybe that's a bit more practical in that context, because you would be using the smaller shield if you just engaged someone in a duel around town or however it was done. You know, so like, yeah, that's where this is more likely. But I think, again, it's the kind of thing where you don't need this. You don't need the ability to deflect a shield like that, or a sword, I mean. You don't need to deflect someone's blade if you just already have the shield to block it anyways. Like, this notion that an incoming sword blow can be so easily deflected, I think is kind of just, I don't want to say fantastical, because that's a little bit mean, I think, to say, but it does seem a bit extra, right? Like I said, it's sort of Occam's razor thing. Why not just punch into the strike? You know, why not just knock it out of the way? And why not deflect it? And why also specifically not just retain the actual grip you're supposed to have instead of already changing it, right? When I grip it like this, I have to have the shield held in this way, and traditionally it's held perpendicular to the fist. With larger shields, they were strapped to the arm, so they would be held like this. But like I said, in that battlefield context, right, the diameter would probably be so great that you wouldn't be able to hold this in the first place. So what you're doing is applying like a battlefield kind of loadout, as it were, to a much smaller, you know, personalized kind of dueling context. And it's just, it's a little weird. I just think that the tactics you would use with a doll sort of supersede, or they work better than combining it just additionally with a katar blade. I don't know. I don't honestly have a whole lot to say about this, just because I think it's a lot more important to try it in like a sparring context, right? But that's kind of my feelings about just combining a katar with the doll. Is that, like, yes, it works, but I don't think it's like the best thing ever or the most necessary thing ever. And like I said, it really only applies, when we look at it from a historical perspective, it only applies to a specific style of katar. And, you know, whether or not that was done historically, to my knowledge, we don't have that much evidence of it. I could be wrong. So overall, my opinion is just that I think more experimentation needs to be done, like more specifically sparring, right? This needs to be tested in a sparring context. And until that happens, I'm not convinced personally. Like I'm just more of a fan of the ability to punch a sword strike, to knock it out of the way, rather than this almost European style way of like catching or deflecting or doing these sort of more, not necessarily static things, but these things that are highly dependent on your ability to like just put the weapon in the way of the sword blow. It just, I don't know, it's just something I'm skeptical of, I guess. I'm not going to touch on the idea of solely combining a shield with a dagger. That'll be something I reserve for the separate full video on this idea. One other thing, though, for this segment that Reloph brought up is the idea that, specifically with this style of katar, you would do this, and then you would also be able to, using the slot or like the depression here, you would be able to hold a dagger in it. Now, another confounding variable, unfortunately, the best dagger that I have is this guy, who has a very intimidating blade shape. Unfortunately, though, this is probably actually ceremonial, so despite the fact that it is certainly, you know, thin enough, you could totally use this to off somebody, but it probably wasn't actually made for that kind of purpose. And in general, like, yeah, I know there are daggers out there with like longer blades and all that, and the hilt shape honestly does change up not just the idea of it fitting in here in general, but it also changes how it would behave when it's just being held with a shield, right? So it's, in other words, it's not the best example, but unfortunately it's all I have to work with. And so the idea that you would combine this specifically with a dagger, no, I can barely hold on to this, certainly with my fingers behind on the blade there. Like, this is just really, it's not it, man. It's not. I think myth busted. Like, yes, the thumb holding it in does prevent sort of, well, it actually doesn't. It still moves around quite a bit. But when it comes to like it moving across this way, like, no, it myth busted. Okay. I do have a more civilian style knife here. This is indeed, as you can tell from the fact it looks pretty much just like a fancy, well, the hilt anyways makes it look like a fancy kitchen knife. Yeah, no, this would have been used in a civilian context, sort of an EDC thing. Yes, you could draw it in self-defense and use it as a dagger in that context. But otherwise it's a more casual thing. And again, not only does the shield diameter add a whole lot to this, I think that's worth noting. Again, yes, longer bladed daggers do exist. I unfortunately don't have one. But with either one, this barely sticks out below the shield. So it's another thing that makes me skeptical of the efficacy, the usability of it. So yeah, it in this way with the thinner grip, right, the smaller grip, that does actually kind of fit in place there. But just like with the larger dagger, it's, well, first of all, the blade is definitely shorter, so that doesn't really work that well. And it's still the kind of thing where if I can't wrap my fingers around it, well, actually, actually the shield is so much a confounding variable here that I can't really test it because it's practically contained entirely within the shield. So again, maybe in the context of like, for very close quarters combat, you want the ability to quickly draw out your knife or dagger or whatever and use it right there. I guess maybe it would work like that if it doesn't just happen to fall off when you like or when you need to adjust your grip, or when some kind of blow comes in that sort of rattles your hand and makes you fall this. If that doesn't happen, then yeah, you can maybe use it like that. But otherwise, it's like, to my knowledge, I can't think of a dagger, something with, you know, a sincerely long blade that would stick out enough like a katar's blade would. I can't think of a dagger that exists, to my knowledge, with a grip this thin, that it would lock in place, that the blade would actually stick out past the shield. So even if it is a little bit more stable than the actual dagger with a bigger grip, it's just not usable. Like, again, like I said, it kind of instantly debunks itself. Because why? Like, how, again, bells and whistles, Occam's razor, I guess that's the thing I'm going to be repeating the most in this segment, is like, this just doesn't work. Like, why overcomplicate things? Especially even if you could fit it with a katar, in what scenario when you have the shield out and you're actively using it, why, when you close distance, are you gonna do this and expose the rest of your body for grappling and stabbing and all that? It just, to me, logically, it just doesn't make that much sense. Again, in order to make this work specifically with a katar, it has to be a lot smaller and thinner of a grip. The blade, consequentially, isn't going to be as substantial. It's not going to be as long, so it's not going to work really with a shield unless it's particularly small. And I mean, yeah, it's just, I don't know. It's also, I can't do this anymore, right? I can't hold it like this because I'll cut my fucking little finger. I should add that I do have to actually like adjust it a little bit. It doesn't like click into place like a Lego brick or anything. Yeah, I don't know. It's weird. I mean, it kind of looks nifty, right? Again, the style points or whatever, the cool points from my first video applies once more. But yeah, when it comes to combining the Sirohi grip with a shield, with an extra dagger or a knife sticking out, no, it debunks itself. It's not practical. You can do it, but the reason why I'm not going so far as to like attempt to show that you can like knock it out of the hand or whatever is because in the first place it barely sticks out below the shield itself. The context in which you would get so close to someone that you would stab them, I mean, certainly you could do it, but when you're like only holding onto it with your thumb, I wouldn't want to stab someone when I'm also holding a katar and a shield, and you know, I'm trying to do like 3 things at once, basically, gripping wise, right? Like that, just like a lot of combination weapons, right? The whole thing is that as soon as you combine these multiple functions, it just does all of them. The resulting product does all of them, if not significantly worse than it does, you know, one or two or all of them mildly worse. Okay, and so finally, to conclude this segment, you know, my thoughts on just the whole idea, if you want to actually, if anyone watching this, right, if you want to be able to combine your katar blade with a shield, you know, you want to be able to deflect blows and also stab or slash, my recommendation, just get a barajam to do, right? We're now past the idea of like discussing the Sirohi grip, but just in general, yeah, if you're really fascinated by that idea of holding a shield and a katar at once, it already exists in history. Obviously, you know, this could be potentially bigger, but whether you like it or not, this is the sort of design that has been produced as a result of trying it out in time across history. It's worth noting, like, yes, the hand is exposed, but this guard actually is raised pretty substantially. It's pretty thick as well, pretty ridged. This would be pretty good at deflecting those blows, at potentially even statically blocking them if necessary. It does indeed have the sort of upturned terminal here, which you could potentially hook things with as well, so that's cool. And yeah, it certainly has the blade length, right, to be able to cut and thrust and all that. So again, not relevant to anything that Reloph brought up in his response video, but just if anyone watching this is actively curious about my thoughts on combining those sorts of weapons, combining a katar and a dhal, it's to go with the sort of time-proven, time-tested design of this, which, to be clear, a lot of people do think that these are like ancient medieval weapons used exclusively by the Vijayanagara Empire. But no, these were actually, the Marathas found themselves to be quite fond of these, and they were produced ostensibly into the 18th century, you know, as long as the Marathas were actively conquering parts of India and retaking them from the Mughals. They seem to be carrying these styles of katar with them. Contrary to popular belief, they're not like this super ancient esoteric thing, unless the Marathas are somehow expected to be carrying these, you know, centuries-old objects with them in their conquests in the 17th and 18th centuries. I think it's, you know, these things were probably actually produced during those time periods as well. So yeah, it's just sort of a proven design. I should state that we know that, by the way, because the British write about the Marathas having this specific style of katar with them, that it's a specific Marathi style. But it was indeed produced first by the Vijayanagara Empire, but yeah, carried into the 18th century, I should say. Carried into the 18th century by the Marathas. And yeah, if you want to really be able to deflect and also cut and stab, just get something like this. That's my opinion on it. And for the record, like, this grip actually is a lot bigger than a standard katar grip, so holding a dagger with it is actually way weaker even than holding a normal style katar with a shield at the same time. So yeah, when it comes to being able to hold a dagger, my general thoughts on it with the whole manual combination weapon thing is that it's not practical, it's not useful. Again, plausibility doesn't equal practicality. Just because you can do it doesn't make it a good idea or a good design or important, something worth teaching and worth considering as a thing done in history. Like, I don't see the value of it. Feel free to try it out in a sparring context though, but yeah, I stick with the historical kind of idea, I guess. Okay, so now moving on to segment 2, or point 2. It's actually a lot less of a sort of debate style point or segment, and a lot more of just like a weapon showcase. So Reloph in his video, he brought up this style of shield. This is a northeast, specifically tribal Indian style of shield. It's the significance of it being tribal is just the fact that this wasn't like used by all of Bengal or anything like that. This wasn't a mainstream shield pretty much ever. It was exclusively used by the Santhal people, who are indeed a Northeast Indian people group. They exist slightly southwest of sort of central or the main part of modern-day Bangladesh and the Bay of Bengal kind of area. If you go from there, not down the coast, but just inland a bit, and again, sort of southwest, that's where the Santhal people live. And they developed this style of shield. This is the one main combination weapon in regards to shields anyways, that existed in India for a good while. Unfortunately, both information about the shield and even just the Santhal people group in general is pretty hard to find. They're kind of esoteric, and unfortunately this is true for most tribal people groups across India. A lot of the research done on them is actually just from the colonial era, or was done during the colonial era. So you get a lot of stuff about like fertility rituals and like the way that marriage is done and like gender roles and all these other sort of weird things that 19th century British people were obsessed with, I guess, or whatever. The point though is that when it comes to anything I can really provide in regards to historical information or certainly historical techniques, yeah, it's not much. There isn't any like primary sources to go off for these. Certainly there are no manuscripts or even miniatures really to my knowledge. There is one drawing I'll show on screen right now. That's the one thing I was able to find on the web about these, in which you can see that they're just kind of used. They're held out more or less like a normal shield. Yeah, that's kind of it. Worth noting that this design is probably at least a few centuries old, because by the 19th century, when British colonial forces were sort of coming into contact with these people, by that point these were reduced basically to ritual objects. They were used just in those kind of war dances. That's what I have here in this antique example. The blade is completely blunt and the tip is rounded. And this, which I should note that Reloph mentions, he doesn't understand what this is used for. Also not too sure about the use of this, since it's more often than not indeed found blunted and rounded over like this. In my opinion though, that is because, again, the majority of these that were sort of documented by explorers and further were taken home into collections and into museums eventually, they're by and large just these sort of dance objects, right? These ritual kind of designs. That's my take on this, right? It is a hook. That's the reason why there's a gap there, however small it may be, is because it's sort of a vestigial remnant from when these were indeed much larger and much more pronounced. Same thing with the blade. I mean, I think it realistically probably wasn't much bigger than this, but I think it certainly was sharpened when these things were sincerely used in combat. But overall, that's my take on it. That's the reason why you find these blunted and with the hooks more or less closed like this as just a loop. It's because at this point they were vestigial remnants of when these things were actually used in combat. That's kind of an overview of the Santhal shield. Like I said, with this weapon, as well as like say with the hooded katar that I showed off, and even just the other styles of katar that I showed off in the first segment, they will all be getting their own video focusing on them, doing like close-up shots and things, measurements of like the blade and the point of balance and everything. These straps, obviously, they're also not antique, by the way. They're crocheted by my girlfriend, so shout out to her. Otherwise though, like I said, there's not many primary sources about these. Reloph in his video mentions that he actually saw a video of that showed presumably just the war dance, but it showed people using these. I asked him about that specifically, and he said that it was a part of some old documentary that he saw. He tried to find it for me, which thank you for the effort, but he was unable to. So he just said, or he provided for me what he remembered, which is that they were kind of used really more or less like a doll. They were used to deflect things. They were sort of punched in the way of strikes, which is indeed what you do with a more normal doll. And so none of the information that he was able to provide, I guess, was anything specific to the blade or the hook or anything like that, which makes sense because, again, these are sort of vestigial remnants, right? They're not designed necessarily to be used outside of that dancing context. And in the dance itself, it's entirely possible it was like a 1-2 kind of thing where they're just striking and blocking and doing that in different positions. And I guess the one thing that's worth noting, the Santhal people, to my knowledge, they did not have their own distinct style of sword, but they used axes. Now, this isn't a Santhal axe. I should add that most tribal people groups in general used axes as opposed to swords. You know, a bit more of an economical kind of item to carry and produce and trade for and all that, right? It's a bit easier to train people to just, hit them with the one sharp bit of the thing. And so my assertion that they mainly used axes just comes from that fact that most tribal people groups in India used axes predominantly as their main weapons in warfare. Also, again, a bit more of a utilitarian object. You can use it potentially for chopping trees, at least when it has a thicker blade than this. This is a Malabari axe from the Malabar region of southwest India, and it's actually mostly a ritual thing. So you would have used it to primarily decapitate animals, and that's about it. To my knowledge, human sacrifice or whatever wasn't actually that common, unless you're talking about executing a prisoner, which it's entirely possible this could have been used to do, but I think just the thinness and everything is not that likely. But yeah, so this is sort of what you'd be looking at for like a Santhal warrior historically. I just wanted to demonstrate that this would be probably what they're working with, is like, you know, an axe, just a simple axe like this, where it's pretty much just a blade. Potentially there could be a spike sticking out top here, or the axe head itself could have a pointy bit coming off this way. But overall, that's basically it. And I don't know, I mean, not too much to add here. I just wanted to show off that it's a thing, it's a real thing. I do think, again, that this would have been a hook. It would have been used as a hook to hook or potentially trap even incoming blades. The way you do that exactly, again, you know, we don't know for sure what was done historically, but I think the idea would be something would be coming in and you'd kind of try to catch it like that and move it out of the way. But yeah, it's all just speculation. I think what really needs to happen is someone needs to have the funds, not me. I'm too focused on buying antiques, but someone needs to have the funds to persuade some person that's good at making shields to, you know, make one of these out of modern carbon steel and all that. But yeah, I don't know. So that's the loadout. That would be what those people were mostly working with, I think. And yeah, the Santhal shield, it's very cool. Also worth noting the concavity of it, right? It is fairly unique for that. I think the reason for that mostly would be in that kind of trapping context, right? Obviously this isn't the best shape for deflecting arrows or anything, which is rather odd. It's worth noting, of course, the Santhal most likely used bows as well, so it is a little weird that their shields didn't reflect like a culture martially around blocking or deflecting things. But this, you know, it would disrupt and mess with the feedback you would get from striking one of these shields, right? All these bumps and everything. It would, honestly, you'd probably mess up a blade, right? It's the reason why I'm not going too hard into this with this antique, is because, like, yeah, I think this would be a very good way of just beating the hell out of your opponent's edge if you're able to make contact with it as it's coming down hard. All of these bumps would just move the blade around and twist it, and it would be rather unpleasant to be on the side where you end up getting your blade, you know, caught or deflected by one of these. It wouldn't be all that fun. And certainly not compared to a smoother type of doll, right? Yeah, I don't know. It's, again, nothing I'm like arguing or debating here. It's just this is the shield, and that's maybe how it was used. You could maybe again, like with the katar, you could deflect a blade or whatever, and you could stab or punch as you're able to. But yeah, I don't know. It's not even anything to conclude with here, really. It's just that this is the shield that Reloph mentions in his reply to my video, and yeah, very cool. Okay, and so I guess that's it for the video. Like I said, the third segment or part of this video is going to be in its own separate video, just to sort of cut down on the exact length. I don't want to be the guy that's known for making these, you know, hour-long video essays about swords or what have you. So yeah, that's it. You know, let me know. Honestly, I'm pretty open in terms of like my schedule, my plans for making videos on this channel. So if you have any recommendations, absolutely put them in the comments. You know, things you want to see me make videos on, outside of just doing, you know, more detailed videos looking into any of the weapons that have been featured in this video, or any of the techniques, you know, like the manual combination weapon thing. So yeah, stick around for that one. I am actually going to just film it immediately after this one, but I'll edit and post this one first, of course. So yeah, look forward to seeing that one probably 20 minutes after I upload this video. Who knows? We'll find out. Oh, and before I forget, thank you in general for the positive reception from the sword community. However small it may have been, I appreciate it greatly. Especially shout out to sword friend Delatrix for the shout out of my channel that I didn't at all ask him for. That being said, probably one of the most confusing compliments I've ever gotten, about, you know, forgetting more than he ever knows. I understand it's supposed to be taken as a compliment, but I don't know. Semantics are weird. And so again, thank you. Yeah, totally leave your suggestions below, all of that. Rate the video 5 stars. Will I end up giving this video the same outro that I did for the last one? You will find out right now.